So welcome back to the second video for this week of Fair Friday. In this case, we are going to Mississippi. This case is not usually typically talked about in the true crime community, even though a murder did happen, and our victim is obviously an innocent person who did not deserve what was happening to him, as in most of these cases. However, I felt that it should be covered because of the historical aspect it has on history. So with that being said, let's go and get started.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed. Think you're something out of my nightmares, standing right there. But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
We're actually going to start with our victim because, of course, in this case, I feel that it is important to start with our victim. So we have Emmett Till, of course. So start with Emmett. Emmett was born on July 25th, 1941 in Chicago, Illinois, to his mother, Mammy. So Mammy Elizabeth Carolyn and Lewis Till. And so Mammy apparently was born on November 23rd, 1923. She was actually born November 23rd, 1921 in Mississippi, when she's like 2 years old, so in 1923. Her family moved from Mississippi because they're in the South. This is like the early 1900s, obviously there's racial tensions going on. So they moved to Chicago from Mississippi. So that's how you got some families still in Mississippi, and you got the other family in the north up in Chicago. So Mammy's parents split when she's like 13, and instead of using like drugs or like boys, alcohol, thank God Mammy uses school as a coping mechanism. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, she shouldn't, like, talk to anybody, but you're saying, like, this is, like, the early 1900s. So mental health and therapy are not as well accepted as they are today. And even if it was accepted, obviously being a black family, they would have had access as much to therapy had they been white, pretty much. So in June of 1940, his mother, Mammy, does successfully graduate a predominantly white high school. Apparently, she was the fourth in history, because again, it's predominantly white, so like she's the fourth of like all the kids that have graduated, and then she's like the first ever black student to reach the A honor roll. So she was very intelligent. So then she meets Lewis when she's like 18, so I guess like right after high school. So Lewis was born on February 7th, 1922. They were courted for a while until Mammy's mother was like, look, he's too fancy for you, you need to cut him off. Like, he's too good for you. And so Mammy and Lewis do, like, I guess, like, ignore, like, Mammy's mom's wishes. They do wind up getting married on October 16th, 1940, with, of course, Emmett being born June the following year. So Emmett was pretty much conceived very quickly after marriage. So sadly, the two would split 2 years later. 1943, Lewis is drafted into World War II, because remember, this is when the U.S. had officially entered World War II. And then he would die on June 3rd, 1945, because he was executed in Italy for apparently war crimes, and the specified war crimes were apparently like raping 2 white women, and he killed a third woman. And so, of course, Lewis left behind his ring to Emmett, so therefore, the ring becomes important later in the story. So remember, there's a ring that he left behind to Emmett. And so, as a kid, Emmett would get polio, and he wound up having a speech impediment because of it. He didn't let it stop him, and he became a joker. And so in the early 1950s, so I want to say like actually 1950, Emmett and Mammy moved to the south side of Chicago. In 1951, she marries this guy named Gene Bradley with the nickname Pink, but they divorced after 2 years. So like 1953, and then Pink, that was his actual nickname, this nickname that he preferred, apparently. He died on August 13th, 1983. So that's the last time we ever hear of Pink. So, of course, we gotta go back to, like, 1955. Of course, I just had to give, like, when Pink died, because he is, of course, no longer with us. So we're in the summer of 1955. Apparently, Emmett has a cousin from Mississippi. He wants to go visit his cousin in Mississippi. Mammy did not want this because this is in the South. She grew up in the... Well, I guess she didn't really grow up in the South, but she knows, like, how the South is. Hence why her family moved away. And so racial tensions are obviously different, like I mentioned earlier, and you have to, like, respect white people. You can't do the shit you be doing up here, you know. She would later say that she actually wanted to take him to Omaha, Nebraska for a vacation, but she winds up basically saying, she does wind up eventually saying that you could go. And so on August 21st, he arrives in Mississippi by train, and he meets his great uncle, Moses Wright. And so Moses Wright, who also is an important figure to the story, he was born on April 8th, 1892. My bad. He's born in the 1800s. So then we're going to fast forward to the fateful day of we're going to fast forward to the fateful day of August 24th, 1955. And so Emmett and his cousin Wheeler Parker, and apparently some other teenagers, they were out picking cotton all day. So then they decided to go to the Bryant market store. And here we have Carolyn Donham Bryant. So Carolyn Bryant was born on June 23rd, 1934, under the name Madge Carolyn Holloway, which I guess she didn't like her first name Madge, so hence why we know her as Carolyn. So the mother was a nurse and the father was a plantation owner. She would marry Roy Bryant, which is why we know her as her last name Bryant. Roy Bryant Sr. in 1951. They would have Roy Bryant Jr. in 1952. June 12th, 1952 to be specific. And so when it comes to Carolyn and Emmett, allegedly she says, and apparently it's kept saying this for years, she says Emmett grabbed her by the waist, whistling her, said, you know, I've had sex with white women before, even though he's like 14, still a child, but okay. Apparently Carolyn felt threatened, and so she went to go reach for a gun, which, you know, is the South, you know, you gotta stay strapped sometimes. And the boys obviously run after they see this gun. And so she goes tells her sister-in-law, Juanita, what happened. That's what sources say. Her name was actually pretty Juanita. So she goes tells her sister-in-law, Juanita, like, what happened? And she's like, we're not going to tell the husbands because, you know, they're not going to kill that boy if we do. Because, you know, we in the South. And one of the children just happens to overhear what they were talking about. So that child, doesn't specify who, but that child apparently tells Roy and JW what happened when they returned. So apparently 3 days later, so like the early hours of like August 28th now, Roy Bryant and his brother JW, which stands for like John William Mylan, apparently. So Roy and JW go to Moses' house because they got tips that Emmett was at Moses' house. They obviously break in, like, they may know where Emmett is. Once they find out who Emmett is, they apparently there were people in the house that were saying, like, hey, if you let this boy go, or if you don't take him, like, we'll give you money. And apparently Roy was really considered this option, but JW was like, we don't need no bad money, we need the boy, he fucked up. I know I should have mentioned this sooner, but Roy Bryant Sr. was born on January 24th, 1931, and John William Mylan was born on February 18th, 1919, and both were born in Mississippi. While they're in the process of leaving with Emmett, apparently there's a woman in the car, and apparently they're asking him, is this him? And it's said to be a woman's voice. It is very heavily believed to be Carolyn, but it was never been confirmed, but it'll make sense because, you know, they need to confirm we got the right dude. So then, of course, Emmett's body is sadly found 3 days later while boys fishing for money in the Tallahassee River. He was tied to a 75-pound cotton gin, and this was attached to his neck by barbed wire. An eye was detached, an ear was cut off, and he was shot in the head, and I believe the shot in the head is what finally killed him. As you can imagine, your body being in water for like 3 days post-mortem, or even like period, his body obviously decayed. Like, all his body being so badly decomposed, the only way they were able to possibly even identify Emmett was because of the watch. Okay, sources are saying watch and others say ring. Basically, you know, like the material that I mentioned earlier that his father left him, that's the only reason they were able to identify him, because he was bruised that badly. As you can imagine, the police are like trying to like bury, like literally bury this, bury Emmett, trying to like basically like just like have a quick funeral and like have him buried to the ground so that way we go. Like, it doesn't get bigger than it should be, in their opinion. But of course, we can imagine, as well as the story is, that also thankfully did not go their way. And so maybe somebody had connections. It was able to get Emmett's body back to Chicago. But the thing is, it was not publicly known that Emmett's body was back in Chicago until it got to Chicago. And so then the sheriff tried to like hide it, basically saying, we don't even know that's Emmett, even though maybe he had confirmed, yes, it is my son. So of course, they were like, okay, we can send it back to you, but it has to be like sealed shut, so that way. I want to call it the mortician, but basically the person that takes care of the body, they said, look, I'll send it back to you, but a mother's not supposed to see the damage that was done to Emmett. So it's going to have to be closed shut if you want your son's body back. And she's like, no, fuck that. I want the world to see like what happened to my child. And you know, understandably. So she has this shit propped open, and this ain't no family only private little funeral. We having public, you know, come and, you know, give your grievances. I want the world to see what happened to my child. Visitation was apparently open for like 5 days because they really wanted people to know what the hell happened. And in that 5 days, more than 100,000 people came to visit his body to give their respects, of course. So then, I guess the trial eventually happens, and then Moses Wright, the great uncle, he basically risks his own life and testifies to get Roy and JW convicted. So after only an hour of deliberation, because normally when it comes to these like murder cases, they're out for like 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 hours, They're out for like a little over an hour. They came back not guilty. We would have been out sooner, but I think one of the jury members had told a reporter later on they would have been out sooner, but they took a soda break to make it look like they actually took the time to think about it. But everybody pretty much already had their minds made up by that point. So I don't know if this part is true, but apparently after the trial, a lot of their friends wanted like nothing to do with them. And so a boycott was obviously done in the store, and this caused the families to close down the store, and both of them moved to Texas. And so on October 15th, the senator of Mississippi at the time, apparently James O. Eastland, had the audacity to leak the news about Lewis Till execution, because remember he got executed for raping and killing white women. He did that to apparently show that the issue with white women ran in the family. So basically, look what his father did. So obviously, since that's his dad, that shit runs in the family. Like, basically trying to make Emmett look bad. Of course, Moses fled to Chicago because he wasn't trying to get his ass killed too. So Moses does eventually return to Mississippi, but it's to testify against Roy and JW for kidnappings, because we couldn't get him for murder, at least get him for something. Because, like, something's better than nothing. The grand jury apparently refused to convict them, and he went back to Chicago, never to return to Mississippi, because, I'm over being bold, testifying against these white people, I'm gonna have a hit on my head. So, understandably, he never went back. So, Mammy apparently went to the U.S. government for help, but nothing happened, despite this causing national outrage. She even went to go speak to the president at the time, which was Dwight E. Eisenhower. The FBI director at the time, Edgar J. Hoover, even had the audacity to say that Emmett never had his rights. The rights that he was given, none of them were ever depraved according to the rights that he has under the U.S. Constitution. 100 days after Emmett's murder, as we all know in history class, they teach us about Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, December 1st, 1955, she refused to, get off the... She refused to move her... she refused to, move to the back for the white man. She was about to do it, but she thought of Emmett and couldn't bring herself to do it. So the whole reason she pretty much is in our history class today is because of Emmett. Hence why I'm mentioning Rosa now. And so in 1956, apparently, so the year after the murder, apparently they go do it. Roy and JW go do an interview for a magazine, and they both get paid $3,000 each, which was a lot back then, because remember, this is the 50s, so things were a lot cheaper back then. Basically, they admit to everything they did, straight up. And look, we did it. Apparently, they went into detail. And by law, they could not be tried again due to double jeopardy, even though they confessed to doing it, and give details to how said murder happened. So another crazy thing that happened, on the 8th anniversary of Emmett Till's murder, MLK, so Martin Luther King Jr., he gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. So JW would try to go be a farmer. Of course, no black people wanted to work with him after considering what he did to Emmett. So he had to hire white people instead, but of course white people thinking they were worth more, simply because of the color of their skin. They wanted more, he couldn't afford to do it, and so he wound up dying of cancer and broke on Christmas Eve of 1980. So Roy was over here getting food stamps for the government, and he was selling them back to the government apparently for full price, which I don't even know how that was working. But apparently he got through his probation and a $750 fine because of it. He did it again and only started a few months in jail. Him and Carolyn would, of course, eventually split in 1979. And so Roy even had the audacity to go try to be a police officer. But, of course, like I said, the murder of Emmett became national news. So pretty much everybody around the country knew what this man did. So he got laughed at and also was refused. Even though he was never tried, so he pretty much had a clean criminal record. Of course, consider what you did, we can't have you on the force, because that's going to make us look bad. So apparently he remarried a Verna, and a woman named Verna, and then he went to go do some welding, and the welding eventually, over time, caused him to become blind, and he died on September 1st, 1994. Moses, kind of, people wondering what happened to Moses. Moses, of course, he died. He died August 3rd, 1977. May he rest in peace. Roy Jr. died in September of 1995, so the year after his dad died. And so fast forward to the year 2003, apparently Mammy was working on a memoir in memory and talking about the murder of Emmett and how it affected her, the country, and all this stuff. She died 2 weeks before the premiere was to come out at the age of 81 from heart failure. And so in 2004, the FBI reopened the case. Now that all this time has passed, we also know what they did to and it was messed up, and times have obviously changed. And so then, apparently, Milo's brother, who is not named, apparently on his deathbed, he confessed his involvement with Emmett's murder. They exhumed his body for an autopsy, and then after they did that, they put his body into a new, nicer casket, and then put the original casket into the Burr Oak Cemetery for a planned memorial. And so that same year, Carolyn was found to have been living in Greenville, Mississippi, remarried, living, well, I guess, as nice a life she could concerning the legacy behind what she did. And her son, they obviously did go knock on the door to go try to see confirm that Carolyn lived there. Obviously no one answered. Her son would eventually arrive home soon after this, apparently, and he didn't want to talk to me there because apparently she has because remember I said Roy Jr. died in 1995, so I guess it's their other son. The other son is not named, but I guess the other son, because somebody can take care of her, because obviously at this point, her being born in 1931, she obviously old now. In 2009, the same cemetery that I mentioned that Emmett was originally buried in, there was a scandal going on where they were selling burial plots. So what happened to the original caskets, it didn't say, but Emmett's casket would apparently be found in a work shed. They decided we're going to put this casket in the Smithsonian, I pronounced that so wrong, Museum of African American History and Culture. So in 2008, Carolyn apparently finally admits that she lied about what Emmett did in regards to what got him murdered, and she would have the audacity to say that when her son Roy Jr. died in 1995, she finally understood how Mammy felt, even though Roy Jr. was not murdered. But okay. Eventually, sometime after 2008, the community decides we're going to make a memorial in Mississippi for Emmett. And of course, Mississippi being a very racist state, over the years it's been stolen, shot, or even vandalized. There's bullet holes in the actual memorial. So then apparently a bulletproof version was made in 2019, because apparently even all these years later, we still need to have bulletproof versions of shit, because there are still racist people walking these earth. And the second one would be at the church where the funeral for Emmett was held. So then another historical thing that happened on April 28th. So April 28th, 2008, Obama accepts his nomination to the Democratic Party. Of course, we know he winds up becoming president and serves 8 terms. Well, not 8 terms, well, he serves 8 years, so 2 terms. And yeah, that's obviously another historical thing that happened in Black history on April 28th. So Carolyn apparently, it doesn't say when, but she writes basically a memoir, basically, I guess, giving the inside scoop as to what happened on that fateful day, what led to Emmett's death, the aftermath, all that good shit. And apparently, that memoir is currently in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, in the archives. And so in 2020, President Joe Biden would sign the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, making lynching a federal hate crime, which should have been labeled a federal hate crime, but I will commend him on that. And so something that just frustrates me, in June of 2022, a warrant was found for Carolyn. Well, it didn't say Carolyn Bryant. It said Mrs. Roy Bryant, but obviously that's Carolyn. A warrant for arrest, and she was never served with it even all these years later. And so then apparently on April 25th, 2023, so this year, 4 months ago, Carolyn apparently died at 88 from cancer. So the memoirs apparently won't be leaked until 2036. Why specifically that time? I don't know if she chose it or that's what they decided was best. And so apparently part of it was leaked in July of 2022. So on July 23rd, 2023, so literally about a month and a half ago, President Joe Biden also signs a executive order for a monument to be created in memory of Emmett and his mother, Mammy, for their historical impact in Black history. And this happened on what would have been his 82nd birthday if he was still alive. And so Wheeler Parker, which was one of the cousins that was with Emmett around the time that Emmett died, he will eventually become a pastor, and this is at the same church that Emmett's grandmother founded. So I don't know why they say their grandmother, because they're they're cousins. But apparently it was Emmett's grandmother that founded this church. And as we know of, he is the last living witness. He's the last person in the story that's a major character that's still alive. So yeah, that was pretty much the case of Emmett Till, at least what we know publicly. I felt this case should be covered, because even though Carolyn did not kill him directly, it was technically her words to cause his death, so And plus, this story should be told, because it has it changed the civil rights history, and me obviously being a Black person, I felt this case should be covered because it's technically part of my history. And even if I wasn't Black, it should still be told because it's part of history. So with that being said, if you have any cases similar, I guess, to this story that may not be as well known, of course, let me know down below. And I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
So if I play dead, will you regret everything that you did, that you said? I don't think you understand what you're doing, and my heart's black and blue from the bruising. I feel like when I'm with you I'm losing. I feel like you think that this